here. So I'm going to introduce the next guest speaker, which is Rod Schulhauser, and he is works with Derek Lobo, who's known as the Apartment Guru, and Rod is awesome, and he's stepping in to present for Derek because Derek is traveling today, right, Rod?
Yes, correct.
Awesome. Okay, and I really appreciate Rod being here. So. I met Derek probably over a decade ago. I was doing some commercial real estate, and I found that he was very, very intelligent and shared his ideas, and I was really enthused about that. And he really built things up. So then I was at the property show, because I hang out at where people that make a difference are there. So that's why I went. And so Derek gave this presentation, a concept about what can they do about resolving the housing crisis, and I thought, well, now that's a big bite. That's a big bite in terms of help, because how do you become successful? You have to tackle, entrepreneurs tackle, okay, real life problems. They don't run away from them, and that's how you do it. So when Derek gave his presentation and then the questions and answers, so we had a good segment afterwards, and then I decided to take it further. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rod, and he's going to explain the details. Thank you so much, Rod.
I appreciate that, Peter. I really enjoyed your presentation because you bring back some memories. I love working with people of similar mindset. And we started talking about Robert Kiyosaki. I've had the pleasure of knowing Robert and a lot of his Rich Dad advisors like Blair Singer. They're personal friends of mine. And then he drops Michael Gerber in the E-Myth. And Derek and I spent probably the equivalent of 3 days with Michael last year. And how many people are familiar with Michael Gerber and the E-Myth from decades ago? And if you talk to our children about that, the younger generations, like E-Myth and Michael Gerber just don't resonate. But suffice it to say, these are great thinking people. And when great thinking people share their principles, that's called wisdom for you and I, because we can learn from other people's mistakes. And that's what I love about it. So thank you, Pierre. Just great mindset pieces for that. So as Peter said, Derek Lobo and I have been working on a project, and I just want to be very frank with you that this project originally started as a passion project, and it wasn't something that we did to go out and create something and with a specific intent. It had all to do with our children initially, is really what it was all about. So I'm going to be spending my time talking about something called the self-funding house. Now, just by that title alone, that probably has a common sense air about it, and you're thinking, okay, I know how to make a house, generate some income and make some money. And Peter once said, he said, Derek and the team, we're apartment people. I just want to say this up front because it's going to make sense as we go through and tell you this story and why it is that I'm here today. And apartments is all we do. We're not residential. We're not even so much on the commercial side of things. We're rental apartments and the little offshoots like student housing and things like that. And we're a little bit different from our typical brokerage firm in that we're not just a big team of brokers who look for the listings, work with clients, sell the property, and do it all over again. We have about 25 people, and we only have four brokers. And the rest of us are marketers, we're content people, because we spend probably 80% of our time doing everything but brokerage. We do a lot of education, we do a lot of marketing, and we actually work with our clients from the dream all the way through to brokerage. So meaning that when we talk about apartments, we help them develop and design. We help them go through the financing, connecting them with financiers, troubleshooting the design, working with architects. So we have a wide scope, and we call it a full service experience. And I say all that because we're going to talk about the residential side, and that's probably predominantly what most people have an interest for, but I come from the space of apartments. So how did this thing all start? Well, this self-funding house, as I said, was all about our children. And I don't think I'm saying anything you don't already know. For people like myself, I grew up and bought a house when the cost of my home was 2, maybe 3 times my annual salary. And now I look over at my 3 kids who are all in their 20s. First one is in their 30s now, and they're going to be spending how many times their income do you think to buy a house? 10, 15, sometimes more, depending upon the market. And I don't know about you, and I don't know if anybody have children in that home buying wannabe stage of life. I'll tell you right now, here's the immediate feedback. And if it's not children, employees. A lot of my employees are 20-somethings. And you know what I saw that I was surprised with? There was actually anger. Like they were ticked that like they grow up in a home and hearing that mom and dad did this and their parents did that and you should save and do this and that. And the formula just doesn't compute in today's reality. It's just you know, the way it is. And so Derek and I last summer, probably about this time last year, we started thinking, you know what, how do we help our kids? How do we? Because unless you're rich and famous or have a huge bank account and you can help out your children, or they are very hyper successful earlier in their lives, it's very, very difficult for the younger generations to get into the housing market. And I think that's why owning a home, that old American or Canadian dream of home ownership, isn't high on the list for the younger generations, just because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so we wanted to come up with a solution for this, because there has to be a solution, you know, and it's not just in our backyard that this is happening, it's countrywide, it's also global in a lot of markets. And so how many people have ever heard of moonshot thinking? Anybody remember back in the 60s when at that time the President of the United States said, we're going to put a man on the moon, and they had no clue how they were going to do it, but by the end of that decade, they did that. Well, that's what moonshot thinking is, coming up with an audacious claim or goal or dream, and really it's about solving, firstly, a huge problem or challenge. Then coming up with a solution that someone hasn't thought of, because obviously if they thought about it, they probably would have solved the problem already. And thirdly, leveraging technology. And so we took this thinking, because a lot of successful people, a lot of our coaches as well, were teaching us about, you know what, with respect to our business, think about the moonshot. Go for up here, strive for up here, for whatever that business goal or whatever it is that you might be going for. And you know what, you'll find ways to get there. So we took that and we put it in the context of the huge problem is homelessness or housing affordability. We said, in our space, even though we're not residential people, it still comes back full circle into the big rental space, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But here was our radical solution. How many people are sitting back waiting for our governments at all different levels to solve this challenge of our housing crisis? I mean, hopefully nobody's sitting back and waiting, because the reality is, yeah, and I want to play the other side of the coin as well. Government is needed. They need to put some frameworks in place, they need to put some policy in place, but we should not and cannot rely on them to do it. They need to give the cards and let people play with the cards. So our radical solution was focus on the private sector to solve the big challenge of housing affordability. Now maybe on the surface that doesn't make sense, but I'm going to pull the pieces of the puzzle together for you. And we want to leverage some technology. And for us, that became an easier piece, because already in our space of apartments and working with developers, we had already created, like when I first started working and got to know Derek, I basically had to take his brain and put it into a digital platform so that his clients could have access to all his relationships and knowledge and wisdom and assets without having to go through him or talk to him on a phone or a Zoom. Right, so we had already employed and developed digital technology, online learning systems, and of course, for anybody who experienced during the pandemic of at-home children going through, whether it's college, university, high school, whatever, they were using LMSs, learning management systems, online to educate. Well, we were already doing that with our clients to educate people that were basically moving from a space of, maybe they were in the hotel and retail space, but they were pivoting to apartments because the pandemic had a massive impact on what they were doing. So we were in the education mode, and we wanted to leverage that in our moonshot thinking. And there's some other ways to actually frame this. So the shared economy, I think we all know this. Uber came about its being, Airbnb came about its being because of one simple statement. They all leveraged existing capacity. Cars were sitting idle, properties and buildings were sitting idle, and somebody thought of a way to take that existing capacity and make use of it or monetize it. That's really what the shared economy is about, taking existing capacity. And a good way to think of it is value, is that everybody wants to add value. You want to add value to your client, you want to add value to your market space, name it. But here's an interesting equation for you. Vision and capacity multiplied by your reach is how you attain and give and provide value. And I want to give you an example, and you may or may not be familiar with this. Anybody familiar with Mr. Beast? I mean, if not, the younger generations, probably more so than people of my age, but Mr. Beast, and I'll simplify this, he has a massive YouTube following, does a lot of, stuff and content on YouTube, and has a massive millions audience. And Mr. Beast came up with the idea during the pandemic that I have a burger recipe, and I love this burger recipe. And so Mr. Beast had a vision for a burger. He also had tremendous reach because he had millions of people that he was connected to, but he had zero capacity to go about and get burgers into the hands or the mouths of his, audience. During the pandemic, guess what? Lots of idle restaurants. There was already Uber Eats, there were already DoorDashes, etc. And literally in less than 5 days, he had 300 restaurants delivering and selling Mr. Beast burgers. So that's an example of someone who had zero capacity. He had the vision and the reach, so he found the capacity, and he brought tremendous opportunity and value to what his idea was all about. So, capacity is a very, very powerful piece. That other element we mentioned was online learning, and if you've heard of Mind Valley, Masterclass, there's several examples aside from even our educational applications of online learning, but these are all the elements that we were bringing together. And the story, and a lot of people have been in the investment space of, let's say, houses for a little while. Anybody been here for a little while at least? Yeah, I know, okay, a couple of hands in the back, that's good. And Derek has a very similar story. Now, Derek, he was an immigrant. His family moved, from Pakistan way back when he was, he was like 7 years old. And they had a wonderful experience. They had a great rental situation in Toronto. He went to school. He started working in the steel industry. But Derek one day bought his first home, and I've heard this story echoed many, many times by our clients. And several of our clients are very, very wealthy developers, private individuals. We only work with private developers, and they have similar stories where they bought their first home. And they do what? They duplex it, they triplex it. Why? How? Because they need to make the house work for them. And maybe eventually they get married, and initially Derek actually lived in the basement, rented out the 2 bigger spaces, and did the smart thing because he wanted cash flow. Then he met his wife, and then they only had one renter, and then eventually they overtook the whole house as they had their children. Now he wished he had held on to it, because then he said he would have gone back into one of those spaces and gone back into that positive cash flow again. But a similar story for many, many home investors. Start with a home, they rent it out. And so Derek was already living what we're going to talk about, because this led to the self-funding house. So what you should really glean right now is, this is not a new idea. This has been around longer than I've been around, right? So, but what it is a mindset change. Because my kids didn't grow up knowing about and thinking about what I just showed you on the previous slide. So what is the self-funding house? Here's the statement is, you can afford a home by turning it into a business by simply becoming a landlord. Shazam, it's not a new idea, it's been there. But a lot of people grow up not realizing there's a formula here. And now all of a sudden, when we started thinking about this for our kids, we said, that's how I can get my son or my daughter into a home, by having them think of that home as a business first, rather than the dream home or whatever title you want to attach to it, and addressing their concerns. What are their concerns? I don't know how to run a business. I don't know. I heard all these bad things about landlords. It's bad. It's tough. It's not fun. We just heard that not too many minutes ago. What's the overwhelming, overarching theme here? They don't know. So they need to know. They need the knowledge in order to have confidence to do that before they'd ever push any button to do it. So this was what bore and brought about the self-funding house. That was our original intent for it, but it evolved much, went down and spread out into different areas that we didn't intend or foresee. So yeah, we launched the book back in March, and it was instantly recognized very, very well, and it actually reached the top 100 globally on Amazon. But that wasn't our goal. Remember, our goal isn't to all of a sudden, hey, we're going to leave the commercial real estate multifamily space and all of a sudden become authors and sell books and get rich. First of all, I just want to admit, books don't make you rich. I've been helping my clients, wealthy people like Derek, for decades. I've been doing that, working for my home for 30 years, and now I exclusively work with Derek because he's got a huge vision, and I love working with entrepreneurs. I've published probably getting close to 500 books now for my clients. Not myself writing about things I think I know about, but working with people who know what they know and helping them bring that vision, because to me, books are tools. Books are business tools to inform people, and away you go. So we launched the book. And, it had its perfect, as I said, it had its space. Why did we write it? It was for our kids. It was for our staff, because I've got 4 staff that are in that age group. And what is it? I described that to you. It is owning a home, treating it as a business by becoming a landlord. And our original target was just who I mentioned. It was the younger generations. But all of a sudden, we started having conversations with our clients, and they started talking about parents downsizing or breakups of family. We're in a country that's just built on immigration. So immigrant families coming in and having opportunity and availability for the supply was another key aspect of it as well. And then we realized that we had to do much more than the mindset, because the first book is all about mindset. Thinking differently about that house is nothing else that the book really was to cover. But we realized that the second book was needed, the blueprint for your self-funding house, that addressed the how-to. So if someone wanted to do this, how do I do this? And the overwhelming premise of this book was to look at an existing home and how to convert it, and knowing the ins and outs of working with municipalities. And we didn't do this on our own. We partnered with several people. Ken Beckendem happens to be one of them, who are experts in renovating existing properties, understands how to work with municipalities, permits, and doing it right. But there's also a chapter in this book, because this book has just been written, it's not been released yet, but there's also a chapter in here that we had to write a couple of months ago because a really interesting thing happened to us. One day, Derek and I are on the phone with one of our biggest clients, probably in the top couple of wealthiest individuals in the country in the space. And he was talking to us because he also builds homes. And of course, last summer, everybody who either builds homes or involved in the sale of new homes, all of a sudden the brakes went on in the market, didn't it? All new home sales went to a screeching halt with interest rates and everything else. And so Alan was telling us this question, and all of a sudden, he's telling us about how that part of his business, and it was just a mere mention as we stayed focused on what we were talking about. And then all of a sudden, Derek piped up and said, "Have you ever thought about addressing that those 3 new home developments you have out in London?" And he went, "In what context?" He said, "We just put the brakes on everything. We're just, the trades are gone. We've closed up shop. We're not doing anything. We're just finishing off a couple of homes that we have already sold, and we'll be closing very shortly." And Derek basically told him this story. And literally within 4 weeks, they were already converting their first house in this new development into a self-funding house with a basement apartment. All legal, the egress is looked after, the ceiling heights looked after, the separation of services is looked after, the fire separation's all in place, the entrance, the driveway, the parking, everything's in place. So all of a sudden, we didn't write this book for a developer. We wrote the book for our children. We wrote it for the younger generations. And then all of a sudden, it blew up. It blew up in a positive sense that all of a sudden, this became a tool to also address new home development in addition to repurposing at existing capacity of existing homes, because this is a great way to make supply available. We came at it from the perspective of making homes more affordable for people who thought they couldn't afford it, because all of a sudden if rental income is added onto the qualification piece of becoming a homeowner, now all of a sudden people can be back into the home buying market. If new construction has the option, just as you can have the option to put a second garage or a third garage on a house or different lighting, why not have the option to put an ADU in the basement or an ADU in the backyard and have it done by a developer, a builder, and have it on your mortgage at this kind of an interest rate rather than a line of credit at this kind of an interest rate as an investment. So there's many ways that developers were thinking, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this book covered both now, the renovation component as well as new construction. And lastly, we realized, because we found ourselves as we had written the first book, that the latter part of last year and the first part of this year, we had several conversations with what we'll call the stakeholders of the self-funding houses. So who are the stakeholders? Yeah, it's the homeowners, but it's the politicians, it's the municipalities, it's the lenders. Because up until this point, I would say up until about the last 6 months, you would be very fortunate if any financial institution would ever even acknowledge income from a rental component of a home. Some of them, I had heard a couple last year that would give a percentage of it, but already right now, 2 of the major banks are recognizing 100% of rental income. Now, there are not products yet that are national-wide going out through these major banks, but at the branch level, we have 2 cases already, and we've got a full development out in London where a Royal Bank is gonna accept 100% of the rental income coming out of these homes. So the people, the stakeholders, also have to change their mindset, because we're in a different space now. Municipalities, they're dealing with their turmoil with the Bill 23 and so forth, and we're basically, the provinces trying to streamline and make available the ability to do what we're talking about, which is the ability to put up to, how many units can I have now? I think it's 4 that you can put into an existing residential property without any roadblocks. But the municipalities have to implement this. So we're in a time of change, but at all levels that we're talking about are working towards it, and we're seeing rapid progress weekly, on a weekly basis of happening. And I'll tell you a couple of stories in a bit. But put this all together, I just want to show you what the solution came for us. So it became a mindset piece, a how-to piece, a piece that we haven't done yet, but we've been doing it verbally, because this is going to be a book only for those stakeholders. It's not for the homeowner, it's not for the buyer, it's not for the builder, it's for those stakeholders to enable and accelerate these other 2 pieces we're talking about. And then we put together and leveraged the technology we had into a learning portal, because if my daughter or my son wanted to learn about how to turn that home into a business and how to become a landlord, we had to educate them. Well, we're not the experts. I don't know how to be a landlord. I mean, I've never been in that space for any considerable length of time. But you know what? We know many experts that are. And so this online learning portal is a destination where we have several industry experts, landlord experts like Avi Levinson and people like this that you may or may not have heard of, where their content, their advice for these people on how to be a landlord, or, we've got people, in fact, I have Robert and his team, Robert Kiyosaki, writing a piece that's gonna go in here for new business owners, mindset changes on how to be a successful business owner, little tips of the trade. Because we want a resource for these people to be able to go to make it happen for them. We don't want to pretend to be the expert. We want to have a landing place to put all the experts together and give these people access to it. So this became what we called our self-funding house program. And we actually brought that program into several people's hands to help them along the way. To give you a quick glimpse of what this would look like, the actual portal itself is like any other website someone would look at. It's a landing page. It tells them what to expect and how to navigate it. What are the various courses that we have in there. So you can see, for example, here, practical advice for new landlords, business ownership basics, a financial model for your self-funding house. So if they want to go, I don't know if the numbers are going to work. Well, we need to give them the tools to at least organize their income, their expenses, and I didn't think about that. I didn't think about this, because not all people have their parents around them or a guiding set of eyes and ears to guide them through the process. So we wanted to give them the tools too. So we've brought all this together, and these are only the courses that support book number 1. We've got probably 5 to 6 times this number that are ready to launch when book number 2 comes out towards the end of the summer. So I just wanted to show you the breadth of this. And this is probably how I want to culminate my part of this presentation, and then get into some of what's happened lately. Probably my biggest conversations now are about what we call solving affordability, and how does this come into play. And I want to say that if we talked about this 6 months ago, I couldn't have spoken to this. But because of who we've been speaking to and how they're applying this already in the real world, has brought together what I'll call this complete solution. So, as I said, at SVN Rock Advisors, we're apartment guys. Like the guys and gals in our office, we're exclusively apartments. We're passionate about it, and that's a big part of solving affordability. Because in a moment, I'm going to show you that rental supply directly impacts the cost of houses, the price of housing. It is a major factor. But so if you look at the 2 spaces, apartments and of all different sizes, and you look at homes and duplexes, triplexes, we'll call that the big and the small. These are the 2 big areas of housing, and both of them have solutions. Apartments obviously are a long-term solution because they don't happen overnight. They basically take somewhere between 7 and 10 years to build a building and get it from inception, I've an idea, to people living in it. Just think of it as 10 years, sometimes it can be done less. And then short term, obviously, is new home construction, because where you're talking years over here, this can be weeks and months. right? If it's a renovation, we're talking just a few short weeks. You can put it in a basement ADU in 6 weeks easily in an existing home. A new home can be built in how many months now? It can be anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 months, depending upon where and how it's being put together. But you take the self-funding house concept and apply it only to residential real estate by what? Treating your home as a business, by becoming a landlord, giving people the tools to do it. We now can have the mindset of people that want to enter into the the housing market. We can give them that extra tool because this becomes a fast rental supply creator in addition to the affordability of the individual who wants to buy the home. Now, why is rental so important? Let me just put the picture a different way. In our country, rental supply is very, very much the biggest pressure point on our housing industry. And the reason for it, number one, is it's supply and demand. I live out in Burlington where, the average rent of an apartment in Burlington was larger at any point in time in my life for a mortgage of a 3,000 square foot home. Like almost double, just to give you the idea. Now, how many people would rather have their children putting money into a mortgage rather than money into a rental space? It's just, we're all gonna go, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But how do they get into the house when they don't have the down payment, when they can't get there? So the law of supply and demand is obvious. We have a huge demand for rental space, so when there's a huge demand, the price goes up. We know all that. So we have a supply issue. More and more Canadians are renting because they can't afford the new home. So people who would have been buyers if we didn't have this crisis wouldn't be renting, but now they're renting. So in addition to all the other pressures on capacity of rental, we're adding more and more people who are looking to rent because the younger generations have lost that dream of home ownership and basically understand that rental is their future in housing. So therefore, more demand on our rental supply. And immigration. We are a country built on immigration because our birth rates will never ever be at a point where our economy can sustain itself. And you know that our immigration allotments, if you will, have been almost double for the next few years just to make up for the last several years of lack of working force into our economy. So that will continue to be our place. That's one of the huge benefits of our country as it is. So the self-funding house comes along and we start now bringing together the two topics that often are kept separate. The topic of housing affordability, the topic of rental. How are they related? Renting and buying are two different things, but they're not now. When I'm talking about this, we're saying the self-funding house is how we tackle affordability by, my home is a business, by becoming a landlord, I get some income, that adds more of my qualification for a mortgage and being able, so we're talking about affordability, and every single time we put in a home or convert a home that has a basement or a backyard ADU, we're adding rental supply. So you can see that it's a vicious circle, but for me, I've not seen it before. It's the first time I think that I've seen it tied together this way. So if we can start to think this way, then we have a faster solution. Remember at the outset I said that government's needed, but government isn't the solution. And I said inside of the moonshot that the private sector solves it. You see right here, this is all in the hands of the actionable pieces, are in the hands of private developers, home builders, homeowners, banks, you name it. We're not waiting for government to put on a rent control or a buy-in control or some sort of overarching policy. We're saying the private sector can do this, which means there's profit in there, there's growth opportunity in there for the investors, the developers, and here's the little caveat on the side I want to mention, because I've had this conversation. We just finished running an affordable housing webinar series. It was 3 days, and we had mayors and municipal board members, planners, developers, all sorts of people together, because we were bringing these parties together. We were all talking about the apartment space, because that's what we do. But what's really interesting, that a lot of municipal governments, with the Bill 23s, where they're saying, yeah, let's put in basement apartments and do all this. You municipalities, you figure out how to do it, but now it's law. And municipalities went, whoa, our constituencies are not going to like that. The not in my backyard syndrome, the this and the that. All of a sudden, all of our development charge and incomes that we get in the municipality are going to go away and we're going to go broke. But very quickly, I wanted to point out to them, and they went, when I told them that every single home that puts in a legal rental suite does what for income taxes? for property taxes. They all go up. And they're a much heftier dollar bill into the coffers of municipalities compared to development charges or building permit charges. So there's a win, 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 win. 4 wins here for the home buyer, for the renter and the renter supply, because we're gonna sit down, I wanna see the pressure on rental demand to come down, and that will take the supply and demand pressures off. It's a win for the municipalities, it's a win for the builders. So there's a way for the private sector to profit and solve and get at the end of the day the right solution, I think, that we are all after. And that's how you put it all together. I'm gonna kind of wrap up here over the next couple of minutes, but one of the things we want to find out is that, I said at the outset, we're apartment people. We're not residential developers. We don't, now yes, we do have a couple clients that do that, but we don't directly work in the space. So we don't have an audience. We don't have the ears and eyes of an audience that go out and work with people and every day are talking to people who are looking to buy a house. So, it actually happened. I'll tell you the real story. One of our developer clients who lives out in BC, his daughter had become a real estate agent within the last couple of years in Kelowna. And Kelowna in BC is kind of like the GTA, high prices, very similar. You could put Kelowna in the GTA and the pricing would be about the same. But she wanted to bring this idea to the market because nobody in Kelowna could afford their own home in the younger generation. She said, can we borrow your book and can I quote your book and borrow your logo? And I want to teach our local community about the self-funding house. And we just simply said, well, yeah, feel free to use it. And so we created a program called Brand Ambassadors where we're going to give them all these images and let them do that because we don't have the audience for these people. So we're just getting the word out because you're going to see my catchphrase here in a couple minutes, but we're just trying to get the word out. It doesn't directly benefit, but it ties into us because of rental supply. That's really how it affects our personal business. And this is actually the home that I alluded to. When Derek had that conversation with the ultimate owner of the Ironstone company, they actually have 3 big developments and another 1,000 lots sitting that'll be broken ground on there. But they have 100 lots in the Grove. The Grove had about a third sold and occupied by the time the interest rates did their thing last year. And he's built that first house that I told you the story about, and that house was sold a few weeks ago. And he's now doing the next 10. And I was out there at their open house for agents, educating their agents, because again, just as we have to educate home buyers, our children, the younger generations, guess what? The real estate community had to learn. So we actually put together with the builder, and what we're helping these builders do is, we're teaching them the strategy on how to attract people to buy this product. Because I had to change their mindset. This isn't, hey, build this house and they will come type of a strategy. This is all those people that stopped and removed themselves from the home buying market need to be made aware again that, hey, you might still be able to afford a home because we have a new strategy here where basement apartment already built, already legal, already permitted. It's going to bring you $1,500 to $2,000 a month in income. Now add that into your mortgage qualification and boom. So we're educating them about the strategy. We branded it, so they branded their home as the Ironstone Self-Funding House. And we're trained, I went out and I trained their agents last week and told them the principles of how to speak differently to the community about it, how to talk to the municipality and so forth. And we've got a great relationship with the municipality now of London as we've gone through this building process. And now other builders want to do that. And the last thing we did, really simple, was we did a community piece, meaning that all the buyers of these homes, every quarter we're going to do a live webinar with them. And they're going to ask questions, and this couple, yeah, they just got their first tenant, and let's hear their story of what didn't go well, what did go well, and you can do it too. So we want to create an after purchase process for their community, because again, this was all about education, right? It was a complete journey for the home buyer to come from, I've never owned a business, I've never been a landlord, how could I do this, all the way to the end being, hey, we'll help you through it. And so that's what we did to enable this client, Ironstone, to offer that to their purchasers. And you know what, 6 months ago, this didn't exist. This is what happened in the last 6 months when a builder went, I like that idea, let's try that. And now we've got 12 other builders in the GTA and Ottawa area that are wanting to talk to us. They've approached us, they want to talk about it. I also want to point out this, is that there are other, I guess, implementations of the self-funding house that aren't necessarily affordable housing solutions, but have their place. This happens to be a high-end, what was originally designed as a condo is like a $5 million piece of property here in the GTA, but a great solution for maybe a wealthy immigrant family who wants to have that kind of a lifestyle. So there are other applications of the self-funding house principles at different price points and different pieces. And so when I summarize this all and say a little bit of a glimpse of the future, I think I've dropped all the little pieces that we're thinking are going to come together. As I said, we've got other builders now that want to take this concept that we thought was going to be, hey, how to teach my daughter to put a basement apartment in so they could afford a house for a change, all the way to maybe this is a new way to build new homes. Maybe this is a way to solve affordability, because I think the reality is we will never expect incomes to come up to the point where houses are affordable. Right? Like if affordability is now 10 times income, we're not going to get 10 times salaries here in the next foreseeable future to compensate for that. So it takes a different level of thinking. So it was all about us just putting a program together, and this was the conclusion of the whole thing. And when people say, well, why did you guys do this? Well, I said, yeah, originally it was just a passion project, but I think the best way I could describe it, it's simply the right thing to do. It's not in our space, but it's worth my time to come out here and speak to it about it. It's worth our time to put together the platforms together to make this happen. Because if we don't, we're going to sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. And we believe the most powerful army we have in this country is the private sector. It's the entrepreneur. It's that realm that goes out and makes things happen. So, Peter, I'm done. I don't know if you want to ask any questions, or if we're good, we have another speaker. But I'm essentially done.
Yeah, please, anyone that's got any questions for Rod, please ask them. Please share ideas. Please share them. Obviously, I'm thrilled with the concept. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll start right here.
Rod, who to contact to make that basement apartment, legal basement apartment? Who to contact?
Well, if you want to just reach out to me, I'll directly connect you with, just give me a background of what you're looking to solve, so I can get you to the right person. But I'm okay to talk to. I can act as a connector, because we are not the experts, but we definitely have a great team of people that we've started to coordinate. Yeah. Please feel free. Yes.
Where do we find the training for agents?
So the agent training is not something we are offering. So the agent training was us working with that house builder and us training their in-house staff agents and all the third-party agents that came to the agent open house. So it's not a publicly accessible piece. It's a piece we offer when we partner with developers. But I think that the training is only of value if the product is available. Now, that being said, maybe this is where your question is coming from. There are homes that already exist, or homes exist that are great candidates for that very thing. And because of that actually is going to be one of the chapters in book number 3 as well. But if you have any other specific questions that I can help you with, or you're looking for little nuggets about marketing or whatever, again, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to have a conversation with you to just offer it to you rather than waiting for something else to appear or arrive, if that's helpful. Yes?
Are there municipalities that are more receptive to this than others? Not in my backyard. I'm thinking even backyard or laneway homes.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants them, and it becomes a real problem.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm going to get to it, but I'm going to give you a story, because in our work in that webinar series I was just alluding to a few minutes ago, one of the biggest aha moments for me was I'm now understanding the frustration for developers working with municipalities. And it's not necessarily the municipality's fault, but understand the dynamics of the municipality. Every 4 years it changes by government, by elections and so forth. And so there's a phase of offering things in to get votes and so on and so forth. But the one thing I found very, very consistent across municipalities, because we had 11 municipalities represented during this webinar, and we interviewed them and we pulled all the content together. Their idea of affordable housing and attainable housing is not front and center house in Oakville or Burlington or the GTA, right? So that's why I just use the common term attainable housing. So they are not yet, they being the municipalities, they don't have the tools, the processes, or the systems to say, hey, Mrs. or Mr. Developer, we want to have you here, and here's what we're going to do to help you through it. They're in a massive learning curve. And so I can use London as an example because we went through it where we had a developer who, every week is in with the municipality, talking to the mayor, the planners, because they're also going, well, what do you want to do? Like they're learning too. So the answer is, what it will take is, it will take a developer who will invest in that relationship, because on the other side of the coin, municipalities aren't in the know. They don't have the knowledge or experience or the history to enable this. This is why I say it's the private sector that has to drive it. They have to drive it and go explain it to the municipality. The municipalities now have been told by the provincial government that this is now legal, you're now allowed to do this and all this, and you have to waive charges and all this. So the platform's there. So how does the developer now work well with the municipality so it's a win-win? And that's where we got in and we taught the developer how to speak to them about, let them know that every single one of these is going to increase, because not only the base home, but the ADU adds to the revenue of taxes, which you'll be happy for.
Well,
and they were planning for it.
I mean, every election and everything, every time you hear from a politician, the problem is affordable housing and the lack of housing. And yet, from a developer or an investment point of view, it's the government that's always in the way.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because they've always instituted policy. They've always, you can go back to the rent control eras and all these kinds of things. And what I do like is, I do like the fact that, Ford gave an overarching opening of the door. He didn't do the how-tos, he just opened the door to, okay, you guys figure it out. I love that, because my philosophy and my principle is always about private sector entrepreneurialism. I'm a big proponent of that, because that's how things get done, as opposed to the slower meandering of bureaucracy and or even bigger organizations. It's not about right or wrong. It's about doing what's right to get it done fast and getting it done well. So I think that the bottom line answer to your original question would be, I think municipalities are learning as much as I think we've been teaching the developer on how to navigate these new waters of approvals and zoning and permits. Because at the end of the day, every municipality in Ontario has pledged how many new homes they'll have by a date, and those dates are either 29 or 31. And there, some of them, Burlington, for example, I think the number is 29,000 new homes by 2029. Well, if I was a developer and I came to this program and showed them how I can double up on the rental and new homes, and do it without adding infrastructure, sewers, like all the infrastructure is already there, because you're not putting in everything brand new. If you start having a number of renovations, like you are using what? Existing capacity. So if a developer goes in and talks to the municipalities about their goals that they've already set, and here, I want to help you reach your goal, Mr. and Mrs. Municipality, that's the kind of language that gets things done, as opposed to this adversarial, I think, history that developers and municipalities have had.
Yeah.
So. Anything else? All right, Peter, back to you.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.